Agapi Gessesse. I am the executive director of an organization called Center for Young Black Professionals. We train youth in 5 major labor gaps in the Canadian market, so trades, hospitality, film, social services, and IT. And so we do that with a lens and understanding that we are dealing with Black youth, helping them understand who they are, what they bring to the table, and where they see themselves in the labor market. So as I kind of was thinking about the concept when I was asked to come here, SANKOFA, as mentioned, is really about looking back, bringing it forward, or looking back and taking what you've forgotten. And so I wanted to really just talk about this concept in the way that I kind of thought about it when it came to me, which was, I think about the past, I think about the present, and then I think about the future, right? And so I think that it's important to acknowledge that in this country, a lot of the times, the Black community has been responded to by government because there has been an active resistance. So does everyone remember when the Summer of the Gun took place? Show of hands, everyone's nodding their head, yeah. So the Summer of the Gun was really active resistance, even though we didn't know it. Because young people were rampant in the streets, violence was happening, and it was, in my opinion, a reaction to anti-Black racism. Lack of opportunities, lack of understanding of who they are. All of the things that Ruth had spoken about, going into a retail store and feeling like you're being watched. All of those things weigh heavy. And one of the things that we know factually at C is that almost 99% of the young people that we work with are dealing with some type of trauma, right? And if you're told that you're less than, and maybe not directly every day, but indirectly everywhere that you go, that's going to cause an anger and an injustice in you. And so we saw that in the streets. And then the murder of Jane Kriba took place, and that really is what broke the camel's back. And then we responded. Youth Challenge Fund. Does everyone remember what Youth Challenge Fund? So Youth Challenge Fund came out, the province put in money, United Way came together, we all gave some money in, and 154 organizations were formed, one of them being C. We saw the reaction take place. How many of those organizations are around to this day, maybe a decade later? 4. So what do we need to do? We need to think back. We need to SANKOFA, right? We need to go back and we need to look at what happened. But then we look 10 years later, let's say, and we think about Black Lives Matter. Again, active resistance. These young people stopped the gay pride parade. People come from all around the world for the gay pride parade. They stopped the parade. They refused to meet with the mayor. They're like, there's nothing to talk about. These are our demands. Until you meet these demands, there's nothing to talk about. And so that resulted in what? The anti-Black racism strategy at the City of Toronto. So all of these kind of reactionary things that we now are really have the resources to take a look and say, okay, as a Black community, what is it that we can do? And back in 2006, when the concept of Center for Young Black Professionals was planted as a seed, what the first thing that the founder did in 2012, because it took a while for that to happen, in 2012, Kofi Hope went into community and he asked the young people, what is it that you need in order to succeed? What are your barriers? You as Black youth, what is causing this mayhem that's taking place? And a few things that they heard was, number one, I need to feel like I belong. If I'm going to a social service agency, that should be my last stop. After that, my problems should be addressed and solved. And that is not what was happening. That is not what's happening now, right? You go to a social service agency, you try and join a program, you act up, and then they're like, oh, too much. You got too much trauma, you have behavioral issues, and they're being tossed out. So when you join a program, I want to be able to get hard skills. I want to be able to learn something here and then go out and be marketable. I don't want to and there's a place for community safety programs where you can come and, you play basketball or whatever the case is. But those things, for very few people, are not going to become a career, right? So I need some tangible, marketable skills that I can learn, and then I can go out and I can actually find a job. So we see those acts of resistance. We see that at C, what took place was a lot of consultation, a lot of understanding of what the problem was, and also understanding who they are as Black young men and women in the context of Canada. And dealing with the hard truth, because the hard truth is, yeah, all anti-Black racism exists. So one of our modules that we go through with all of our young people is being Black in the workplace. You cannot say and do what you please. So how can you bring your entire self? And we speak about diversity, and even in my bio it says diversity, and I always think, oh my gosh, I hope people don't think that I think it's like a Black person on a board, you know, because that's not what it's about. Diversity is about bringing your entire self to the work. Your experiences, everything that you come with, even if it involves trauma, that comes with resilience. Even if you used to sell drugs, that comes with like a whole heap of transferable skills, let me tell you, right? So taking all of those things and being able to say, okay, that was my past, but what can I take that's good out of that and bring it into my future, right? And so when we think about unemployment rate, and we need to look at why is it that it is 12% unemployment rate for Black youth in this country, which might sound a little bit low to some people, but think about it. We make up 5% of this entire country. That is like disproportionately not okay, right? And we need to look at, it hasn't really changed that much. So what are we not doing? So again, we need to go back and collect what we forgot. Because we left something back there, we left the lesson, we left something that we need to go back and collect. And so it kind of brings us to the present. And C is very proud to say that we work with young people who are furthest from the labor market. So when they come to our doors, we ensure that that is their last stop. Whether they finish the program with us or not, we're walking that thing out with them. You don't show up to program, we're knocking on your door. We're talking to your friends. We're trying to figure out where you are because we're not going to leave anyone behind. And so we need to start to think about that. No one gets left behind. We have forgotten what our ancestors have been about. Even in my own culture, my parents are Ethiopian. If someone passes away, if someone has a wedding, if somebody is there to celebrate, they don't even care if they met you one day. They don't even need to have met you. They could, now my parents have Facebook, so you just gotta post it on Facebook. Oh, my daughter's graduating, everybody's showing up. And we have to have that type of sense of urgency because we are in a state of emergency. If we don't acknowledge it, no one outside of our community is going to acknowledge that. And so what we need to understand that in the present is we have a 90% retention rate. We work with young people furthest from the labor market, people who serve all youth. 90% retention rate is sometimes next to impossible to get. But when you understand that you have to rally around a young person, who are you as a person? What are your barriers? Okay, you need childcare, let's figure that out. You need housing, let's figure that out. You have a criminal record, let's figure that out. Each and every one of those barriers need to get addressed one by one. It's not a blanket thing. It's you're one person, you're one situation, let's figure it out. And we rally around that one person and all of the issues that might surround them until it's done. And then they come back. When they get it right, they come back and they volunteer their time. And we as an organization can only do so much. Because now we've looked back as an organization, we said what's worked, what is our programming, but it cannot be resolved with just programming. Because a lot of the barriers that our young people are facing, childcare, a lot of them need pardons, a lot of them are dealing with refugee claims, they need defense lawyers, they need therapy, policies around welfare. You can't make more than $200 when you're on Ontario Works, otherwise you get kicked off. What's $200 in 2020, right? So these are all policies that are outside of the organization. So now how do we start to talk about system change? System change is what needs to take place. We need to be able to take advantage of the next half of this decade, and we need to start having a conversation around systemic racism and the things that are outside of our community that are creating barriers for our young people, not even just our young people, all of us. And then we want to talk about moving forward. Everybody's going to say, you know, we can all talk about what's not going well. Oh, there's systemic racism and anti-Black racism is everywhere and all of these things. But how do we now move forward? And the way to move forward is together, everybody. Our community, not even just on a community level, but we all need to move together when it comes to government, healthcare, because that's a very large, Lee Ben's in the back shaking his head, because he would know better than anybody that even in the healthcare system, there's anti-Black racism. The healthcare system needs to work together. Corporate Canada needs to get together. The Canadian economy does not have, we all keep talking about a people gap. Oh, I can't find any, you know how many employers we talked to and they said, oh, well, I just can't find a qualified candidate. No, you don't have a people gap. You have a skills gap. So we need to start working with employers and saying, what is the skill that you need? Okay, we got it. Come over here, we train those young people, and then we become the intermediary. So nonprofits, governments, and healthcare providers, and corporate Canada need to come together, and we need to start using the last bit of this decade, and we need to start to strategize. Remember when I spoke about earlier, when all of these active, there was this active resistance, the Black Lives Matter movement, the summer of the gun. We need to stop waiting for something to happen. What we need to start doing is using this last half of this decade, and we need to start having conversations about system change and how we can all move together so that, and I say to my staff all the time, when we come into this workplace and we step our foot into the C's doors, what we need to be doing is working ourselves out of a job. Because when organizations like ours don't need to exist because equality has shown up, then we'll all be happy, won't we? So, thank you for listening, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your decade.